Some more coaching news, Joe. Another coordinator is leaving Ohio State. This time, Chip Kelly is going to the Raiders. Let me just ask you this before we get rolling here. Look, I'm going to get to the Ohio State thing for just as, and we'll talk about Ohio State clearly through this entire thing. Brother, this is a great move for Chip Kelly. I'm sorry. I mean, it's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to recruit. He wants to coach. He wants to be an OC. This feels right for him. I'm not mad at him for doing this.
No, and I actually think that most people aren't. They accomplished the end goal. There was no promise that this was going to be some sort of a long-term relationship. He came in, the offense was awesome. They won a national championship. Bing bong, it's done. And we move on. I hate that him going to the Raiders because I feel like he had better options with the Texans, the Jaguars, and the Buccaneers with the quarterbacks and the weapons that he has. Maybe he wants to shape this thing in his own direction. Watch out for Will Howard to the Raiders, maybe in the second round or the third round. That is certainly in the mix. Part of me wonders if this ends up being some sort of succession plan for Pete Carroll. Because he's only going to be there for a couple of years, probably. He's the oldest active head coach. It's interesting to consider. It's probably why he did it. The Ohio State side of this, though.
Yes.
I sit here and now wonder, all right, Ryan Day, you got to get to work here. Like, these need to be home run hires. You just had two awesome hires with Jim Knowles.
You can't be hitting them little dribblers at softball practice. You better go get home runs.
Seriously.
I told you I was going to mention it.
And of course you found a way. I'm unsure of who they end up going with. And I was reading an article leading into this. Brian Hartline was mentioned. I don't think that you could go backward and go back to Brian Hartline. If Brian Hartline calls plays, it is with another team. I think that Joe Moorhead, who's the head coach at Akron's worth considering.
Yeah,
I think that Mike Shanahan at Indiana's worth considering. And then I would also throw into the mix, if they want to go spend a shitload of money, go and get Will Stein from Oregon.
Okay. From the Ohio State side of this, let's talk about the OC and then let's talk about the overall picture.
Okay.
I mean, look, I can't do one without the other. Joe, I don't want to make a determination on what is going to happen at Ohio State until he hires his DC and OC.
Mm-hmm.
Brother, we almost in February. We are in February. Now, the thing about that is Chip Kelly got hired in February, and they came in there and they won a national title. So I don't think that there should be any panic yet. But let me just say it like this. My man, you got a lot to replace. A lot to replace. An OC, a DC, a starting quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, DBs. Joe, we're about to see if Ohio State reloads or if they got to do a small Ohio State version rebuild here. And I'm not saying they won't be a playoff team or anything like that, but you know what I mean. You start getting to a point here where at what point is like going through a whole new offseason with a whole new staff, but all new play callers. By the way, it's February. Guys have been working out for a month already. You're about to go into spring within a month. So installation, okay, for spring football, I mean, what you going to figure out in a month? How much can you install in a month before you hit the field? By the way, you haven't hired anybody yet. So there's a lot of things that you got to overcome. I'm not saying for one second that Ohio State cannot overcome them. Mm-hmm. They have the talent, and they have recruited the talent to overcome it. They've done things in the portal to overcome it. But I think that there's a fine line between replacing everything that you got to replace, regardless of how talented you are. Man, it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Buckeyes. I know it. You get your national championship. Ryan Day gets over the hump. Joe, I don't know of any head coach outside of one maybe that I know they could go through this and still make it back to a promised land. This is a lot.
It is a lot. It's different from what Michigan had to do to reset after their national championship.
Yeah, because they were just completely depleted.
They were depleted. Harbaugh left, took most of the staff with him because they had to disappear. And they were going through all the NCAA nonsense. So it's not the same, but it's not far off because there is a lot of talent that needs to be replaced. Thankfully, compared to Michigan, though, they're very well recruited. So there's an ability, and I said this 2 shows ago, sometime last week, there is an easy incentive to go and hire an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator, but specifically an OC. You're pitching somebody on saying, hey, man, do you want to work with a former 5-star quarterback in Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith? This first year is going to be a cakewalk. You're going to put up a ton of points. You're going to be able to have one of the most productive offenses if you do this thing right. You know who's actually a guy that I completely forgot that makes a lot of sense? Kevin Wilson was fired from Tulsa this past offseason. He was the offensive coordinator and tight ends coach from 2017 to 2022. That offense was great when he was the OC. I feel like that makes the most sense now that I think about it. That probably makes the easiest. Just bring him back, plug him in. We're literally sitting here talking about Ryan Grubb reuniting with Kalen DeBoer. The same bit. What worked before without having to overcomplicate it sometimes is the best decision. I don't know how many guys are on the roster that were recruited by him, but there's another part too there that, hey, maybe some these older guys have familiarity with him.
I mean, I'm sure there's some, but nobody is going to have familiarity with him. I mean, I understand. Like, I legit. The Bama thing's different because it was the same system of what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I mean, Sheridan comes in here not changing the play calling of what they're doing. You bring somebody in, it's going to be new terminology. It's going to be new play scheme, new play design. This is brand new, unless we talked about this with Marcus Freeman last week, so I'm going to give it to Ryan Day. The worst thing that can happen is that Ryan Day calls plays. It's the worst thing that can happen. And quite frankly, that's not a bad thing. Look, Joe, I mean, I think there's a new day in college football in this sense that when you go to I'm going to keep saying this. I've seen it in college baseball over and over and over again. Because the schedule does not benefit you when it comes from like you playing an extra month and teams are hiring and firing coaches a month before you, you're going to see some massive reset from all of these teams and institutions that are getting to either the Final Four or getting to a national championship game.
Yeah,
I know I'm not. Well, people will say, well, how do you know that? Because it's only 1 year. I'm telling you, I've seen it. I'm watching it literally every summer.
Well, a lot of people in the sport are – anyone who wants to disagree with you is not paying close attention because a lot of people actually within the sport have completely agree with that statement that you're making. Like coaches, administrators, they completely agree with this belief that you have. It's true.
The only way you can get around it would be to push the season back a week, 2 weeks.
I don't think that that's a bad thing because there's no draft in college football. In the NFL, there is. That's supposed to help the bad teams, build up and bounce back. You're not going to get that same level of impact in college football, but instead you win a national title unless you have everything like really locked in and built successfully. You're going to have to take a slight step back the following year in order to return back to your most premier ceiling of production.
It is an interesting ride that I think Ohio State's about to be on. Again, you have a lot of talent in a lot of key places. But again, you got O-linemen you have to replace. D-linemen you have to replace. Linebackers, DBs, coordinators, quarterback, running backs, receiver, arguably a first-round wide receiver. I know that they've recruited at a very high level. I don't care who you are. Like, that is I'm saying that to say, like, and what is still their standard? What could they still do? They could still go 10-2. Like, because of their schedule, they could still do it.
Right.
But you will see it on the field like, oh, man, I don't, Ohio State, I mean, these games are close. They're just talented and well-coached enough. It's a big overhaul. Now, for Ryan Day, familiarity could be a big deal. From a player standpoint, I mean, that's a lot to overcome, so we'll wait and see. The last thing that I will say, I never like first-time starters going into a situation where you're just getting into a new system. I never have liked it. I never will like it. I think the only way you get around it is experience. So, I mean, the only times we've seen good quarterbacks make that leap was quarterbacks that had experience. Bo Nix, Burrow, with Joe Brady. I mean, Will Howard, literally, they just saw it. So, I mean, there's just so many examples. I mean, Stetson Bennett looked like hot garbage, goes to JUCO, comes back, goes to 2 national titles and wins them. I mean, that's a 22, 23, 24-year-old kid that's doing all this. So, I don't want to sound negative towards Ohio State, but I think that you get my gist, though, here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I still think they could be a playoff team, but it just feels like I would be stunned. I would be stunned if they could get back even remotely close to where they were in some sense.
Yeah, the only way that we're ever going to have a team that in the offseason coming off of a national championship that we're sitting and talking about them bouncing back and going back to another national championship is if they returned
Everybody.
I wouldn't say everybody, but I would say their starting quarterback and a lot of key contributors. So like Michigan, the year that they lost to TCU, they didn't get to the national championship game, but they got to a Final Four. That was the type of roster situation that's comparable of bring back your starting quarterback,
right.
You put a couple guys out into the NFL, but you're bringing back a good amount of your offensive line and, young key players and all that stuff. It's hard to do that. It's very, very hard to do that in the modern version of college football, but that's what it would require.
Do you know who's smiling ear to ear right now?
Who's that?
I got to be honest with you. I think it's James Franklin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that makes things a lot easier for him. But I'm going to keep saying this. He better get the job done. He better beat Ohio State. If he doesn't beat Ohio State with all this changing, then what the hell?
I mean, yeah. If you can't, then
right.
Boy, we got to have some serious conversations then.
Yeah.
And you took their DC. Okay. Last coaching thing here before we move.